Ma'am, do you, generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those?
These are photographs of the black Lexus SUV that I examined at the Canton Police Department.
What's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed as far as the black Lexus on that date of February 2nd?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'll also speak to the minutes of that exhibit.
No objection.
Your Honor, if I may, I don't mean to.
So Madam Court Reporter needs to,
I understand. So all I'm asking, Your Honor, is if I may approach just to show a couple more photographs while the court reporter is recording so that the witness may review them. Are we done?
If anyone speaks before I'm done, it won't be on the record. It's 138 to 155.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with court's permission.
So, Mr. Lally, you really need to keep your voice up and the witnesses.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish those photographs that have now been marked for the jury?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could start with 2498. Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is a picture of the license plate of the black Lexus SUV.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2499. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen, Ms. Hartnett?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the front end of the Lexus SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, next photograph, 2500. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen as this exhibit's 140?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize within this photo?
It's the exterior of the Lexus SUV.
And as far as this is inside of the garage of the Canton Police Station, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In addition to the vehicle, is this a fair and accurate portrayal of what the inside of the garage looked like when you were there that day on February 2nd?
Yes.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gillen, 2501. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And which part of the vehicle are we looking at in this photograph?
Looks like the front passenger side of the Lexus SUV.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2502. And do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph as well?
Yes.
And which side of the vehicle are we looking at this point?
The driver's side.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2505. And do you recognize what's in this photograph, Ms. Harnett?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this?
That's the rear driver's side of the black Lexus SUV.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2506. Do you recognize this as well?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this?
That's the rear of the black Lexus SUV.
As far as the caution tape that's up and around the vehicle, is that something that was around the vehicle at the time that you first came into the garage?
Yes, it was.
Now, from this photograph 2506, which is exhibit 145, using the laser pointer before you, if you could draw the jury's attention to the damage that you were talking about, or where you observed that located on the vehicle.
There's damage here on the bumper, and there was also damage to the rear door. I think it may be blocked by the caution tape.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2508. So looking now at what's been marked exhibit 147, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in a little. Now, with reference to the damage that you were talking about that may have been blocked by the caution tape in the prior exhibit, do you see that in this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And if you could, again, using the laser pointer, before you draw the jury's attention to where in this exhibit you observed that damage.
Right here. It's on the rear door, right underneath the window.
Now, Ms. Hartnett, as far as crime scene response is concerned, when you're doing this kind of examination of a motor vehicle, can you explain to the jury sort of what that process entails and what is it that you're doing over the course of your examination?
I complete an overall visual examination of the vehicle, noting any damage or anything that stands out that should be recorded. I then look for any stains or material that is on the vehicle, specifically any transfer that could have been left behind by a victim.
And as far as making those observations, what, if anything, do you then do with regard to those observations that you made from visual inspection?
I'll then perform testing on any stains that I did note or any areas of interest, and then collect anything that needs to be collected.
Now, with respect to this vehicle and this examination, what is exactly that you were requested to examine?
I was informed that this vehicle may have been involved in a hit and run, so I was requested to examine it for biological material.
And what, if any, information were you given upon arrival to the Canton Police Department in regard to that vehicle?
I was informed that the victim had scratches on his arm, as well as the fact that the car had been towed through a blizzard.
And did you perform any testing with relation to the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
And what was that testing that you performed?
I performed blood screening on the lower lying areas of the undercarriage, on each side of the tire flap, as well as the edge of the bumper and the exhaust pipe.
And what were the results of that testing that you performed there in the garage?
Those were negative.
And what, if any, evidence did you collect while you were either from the vehicle or from any other source while you were at the Canton Police Station that day?
I collected the apparent glass from the rear bumper. I collected a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear door. I also collected a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear bumper, as well as the apparent hair from the rear quarter panel. And I collected the taillight housing from the vehicle.
And turning away from that just for a moment, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for photograph 2512. And Ms. Hartnett, direct your attention up on the screen. What's been now been marked as exhibit 150? Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what, if anything, of significance in relation to items collected or items that you observed, do you observe in this particular photo?
I observed the apparent glass on the rear bumper.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2515. And again, up on the screen, what's now been marked as exhibit 153. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Now, as far as that area that you were talking about where you recovered, which you termed initially in the garage as an apparent human hair, do you see the location of that within this photograph?
Is it possible to zoom in a little bit on the area right next to the rear chair light? To the best of my recollection, it was in this area.
Now, as far as areas where you observe certain items or where damage is indicated or observed by you, is that later marked in some fashion?
I note the damage in my notes.
But as far as on the physical item itself, is that marked in any way, shape, or form?
Yes, I'll use stickers to indicate areas that I would then refer to back in my notes.
So that second set of photographs that I placed before you when the stenographer was marking those exhibits, do you generally recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
What do you recognize those?
These are pictures of the interior of the black Lexus SUV.
May I approach, Ron?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'll seek to introduce in a bit. Just 4 photographs of the next exhibit.
Is there an objection, Mr. Jackson?
No objection, please.
One 56 to 159.
I'll take those. Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury as well.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2521. Ms. Hartnett, again, direct your attention to the screen. Do you recognize what's now been marked as exhibit 156?
Yes,
What do you recognize that to be?
that's the driver compartment of the black Lexus SUV.
And if I could have Ms. Gilman photograph 2527.
Your Honor, may I have just a moment with counsel?
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor, appreciate it.
So Ms. Hartnett, direct your attention to the screen, photograph 2527, that's now been marked as exhibit 157. Do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And what is depicted in that photograph, ma'am?
It's the front seat area of the black Lexus SUV.
And specifically, as far as the center console area of that vehicle, is that fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed inside the vehicle on February 2nd?
Yes.
And lastly, from this packet, Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2535. And Ms. Hartnett, 2535, which has now been marked as exhibit 159, do you recognize what's up on the screen there?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the interior of the trunk of the black Lexus SUV.
And is that fair and accurate portrayal of the interior of the trunk as you observed it in the Canton Police Department garage on February 2nd?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing another series of 9 photographs, and you just ask you to look at those. Look up when you're finished, but really what I'm going to ask you is, do you recognize what's depicted in those? And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And generally speaking, what's depicted in those 9, that set of 9 there?
These are pictures of the rear passenger area of the black Lexus.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm going to introduce and admit as the next nine exhibits.
Is there any objection, Mr. Jackson?
None, Your Honor, thank you.
Well, you really have to keep your voice up.
I'm sorry?
You really have to keep your voice up.
I apologize, Your Honor.
One sixty through 166. I'm sorry, 167.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish portions of this for the jury as well?
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2539. Sergeant, what's up on the screen is photograph 2539. That's now been marked as exhibit 160. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the rear passenger area of the black Lexus.
Now, as far as the damage that you observed from the broken taillight, if you could, using the laser pointer before you, direct the jury's attention to that, or what's visible of that in this photograph.
This area here is the broken tail light.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next photograph, 2540. Now exhibits 161. Again, Ms. Hartnett, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where you observe, if anywhere in this photograph, damage to the right rear passenger.
There's damage in this area here to the rear tail light.
From the damage that you observed, it essentially wraps around from both the back and from the passenger side of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2554. And Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen as photograph 2554, exhibit 165?
Yes, I do.
And talking before, earlier in your testimony, about some stickers or some sort of evidentiary marker that you would put on an item that you're examining, correct?
Correct.
And do you see any of that in this photograph here?
Yes, I do.
And could you direct the jury's attention using a laser pointer to where you observe that and what, if any area of damage or what that's to note?
There's a sticker here, and I know you can't see it. I don't know if you can zoom in. There's a letter on the sticker, I believe it's A, that denotes that there's something there that I was going to collect. And right next to that sticker here is the apparent hair that I noticed.
Gentlemen, if I could have photograph 2558. My apologies, 2556. And similarly, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize anything in this photograph in regard to something that you had marked?
Yes, that's the rear bumper of the SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in a little on that placard. Okay. And Ms. Hartnett, in this photograph, what, if anything, is depicted that you noted something sort of black or further examined at a later?
There's pieces of apparent glass here on the bumper.
May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing you another series of 4 photographs. If you could just look at those, look up on your pen. You recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
This is the rear passenger exterior right below the tail light on the Lexus SUV.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Come up, please introduce you as the next exhibit.
No objection.
It's 169 to 172.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish some of these photographs to the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2573. Ms. Sergeant, again, photograph 2573, what's now marked as exhibit 169. You recognize what's depicted in this?
Yes, I do.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what we're looking at in this photograph?
This is the area of the rear passenger side of the vehicle just below the tail light.
And Ms. Gilman, if I get asked sort of towards the top center of that photograph, if you could zoom in on that area. Ms. Hartnett, do you observe another sort of sticker or placard that you placed in that area?
Yes, I do.
And what, if anything, is that in reference to?
I'm sorry, I can't see what the letter is on it, so I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
If I could ask Ms. Gilman.
So, Mr. Lally, when you when you put your head down to read, your voice goes down considerably. We can't get a recording of your voice, so you need to speak up.
Understood. Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2576. And Ms. Gilman, if you could, with reference to the two areas up on that, if you could zoom into that area. I'm sorry, first on the one below. Ms. Hartnett, can you see better there as far as what the sticker is and what you had noted there?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what you had noted in that particular area?
I noted there were scratches in that area.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, the one above. Thank you. Also within this exhibit 172, there's another sticker further upward on the vehicle. What, if anything, did you note or observe in that particular area?
In that area, I noted the apparent hair.
Thank you. May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
There's another series of photographs of this asking the same question. If you could take a look at those and asking if you recognize generally what they are.
Next question, Mr. Lally.
Yes. Sorry, Your Honor. May I approach?
Yes.
I'll call on to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
No objection.
173 to 186.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd ask to publish some of those photographs for the jury as well.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2558. Again, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's contained in photograph 2558, exhibit 173?
Yes, I do.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just zoom in a bit on the sticker in the middle of the screen. And again, Ms. Hartnett, what is depicted in this photograph?
That is a picture of the apparent hair I noted in the area.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2561. For the record, this is exhibit 176. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in a bit on the sticker in the middle there. Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's depicted in this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the damage I noted on the rear door.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach
Yes.
the witness? I'm showing you a series of 3 photographs. Those that we finished. And do you recognize those, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photos that I took of the taillight housing back at the lab.
And what's contained in that, those 3 photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of the taillight housing once you had removed it and taken it back to the lab?
Yes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to seek to introduce you as the next witness.
No objection.
Thank you.
One 187 to 189.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so, Ms. Hartnett, before we get to those photographs, I do have a few questions. So it makes no difference to me, but I think we can turn the lights back. Thank you, Mr. Officer. Now, as far as the collection of that evidence that you collected from the vehicle specifically, how was that evidence collected? And again, you've received training in regard to collecting evidence, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the collection of evidence that you did in this case, was that in conformity with that training and experience that you have?
Yes, it was.
And so how did you collect those pieces of evidence from the vehicle on that particular?
It depends on what the item was, the taillight specifically, is that what you're asking about?
Well, first, let me ask as far as the hair, and then I'll move on to some other items if that's all right. So as far as the hair was concerned, how was that collected?
I would have collected the hair with tweezers, put it in a glassine envelope, and then put that into a larger manila envelope.
And as far as those steps that you take, as far as the collection is concerned, what are some of the concerns for that, or why is it that you take those steps?
Prior to touching any evidence, I would put on gloves. I'm not sure in this case whether I used disposable tweezers or reusable tweezers. If I used reusable tweezers, they would have been bleached prior to my using them to prevent contamination.
And so each of those sort of steps that you take in your collection process, is that fair to say that it's in an effort to combat contamination?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to the paint chips or the paint standards from the vehicle, how did you collect those?
Those would have been collected with a disposable scalpel. I use it to scrape off pieces of paint from the vehicle, which are then put in a glassine envelope and a larger manila envelope.
And as far as the pieces of glass from the bumper area of the vehicle, how were those collected?
I collected those with gloves. I may have used tweezers. I don't recall at the time. But again, if I used tweezers, I would have used bleach tweezers or disposable tweezers.
Now, as far as that taillight assembly was concerned, how was that collected, or what, if any, issues did you have with regard to collecting?
I removed the taillight. Once I had the taillight housing in my possession, I did have trouble disconnecting it from the vehicle. So a police officer on scene did help me disconnect it from the vehicle so that I could properly package it.
And as far as what exactly was it that that officer helped you do, or what, if anything, did he do?
I believe he just removed, helped undo the wires that were in the back of the taillight so that I could properly hold it and didn't have to place it down anywhere.
So you had two hands on the taillight as he was performing that, is that correct?
Yes, I believe I did.
And as far as the area of the taillight that you were holding, you were wearing gloves, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as far as that area that you were holding with your two gloved hands, did that officer touch any area of that part of the taillight?
Not to my recollection, no.
And do you recall whether or not that officer was wearing gloves himself when he disconnected that wiring?
I don't recall.
Now, as far as once you removed that taillight from there, what, if anything, did you do with the taillight there?
I put it into a brown paper bag and then transported it back to the lab, where I then properly secured it in a box with added cushion from additional paper to ensure that no additional damage was done.
Now, with respect to your time at the Canton Police Station, were you presented with any additional evidence by any officers from the Canton Police?
Yes, I was.
And what were those items?
I was presented with a broken drinking glass that was reported to have been recovered from the scene at 34 Fairview Road. I was also presented with several solo cups filled with frozen red-brown stains.
Now, starting with the drinking glass, what, if anything, did you do with regard to the drinking glass?
I packaged it in a brown paper bag.
And with regard to the cups with red-brown stains contained within, what, if anything, did you do with regard to that?
I allowed the cups to thaw, and then I took 2 sterile swabs, like something similar to a Q-tip, and collected a sample from the red-brown stains in those cups.
And then what, if anything, after you took the swabbings from those solo cups, let me ask first with regard to the solo cups, what were done with those?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So after you took the swabbings from the red cups, what, if anything, was done with the red cups?
I returned those to the Canton Police Department to store as they saw fit.
And as far as the swabbings that you took, what did you do with those?
I secured those in a glassine envelope and a larger envelope, and then transported those back to the lab.
Now, after your examination on scene, you returned back to the lab, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what items of evidence did you examine first in this case in the laboratory?
I examined the apparent hair from the vehicle as well as the broken taillight.
Now, starting with the examination of the taillight, well, let me ask, in general terms, when items are taken by you back from any kind of scene or any kind of place that you're processing, and you bring them back to the lab, what is it that you do with them when you get back to the lab?
When I get back to the lab, I ensure that they're packaged properly, that they're sealed, and they're stored in the appropriate location within the lab. I also enter them into our laboratory information management system so that from that point forward, those items can be tracked throughout the lab.
Now, each of those, now when you come in with sort of a case, is there some sort of number or something that's associated with the case when you first sort of generate that?
Yes.
And do you recall the case number that you assigned or was assigned with regard to this investigation?
Yes, I do.
And what is that case number?
The case number at the lab was 22-2184.
Now, with regard to each specific item of evidence that's taken back to the lab and logged in, what, if any, numbers are assigned or associated with those particular pieces of evidence?
Each piece of evidence is given an independent lab item number.
Now, with respect to the taillight, that was labeled as 3-1, is that correct?
That's correct.
So with respect to item 3-1 or the taillight, can you explain to the jury the examination process that went into that?
Sure. I prepped my workspace by spraying it down with a 10% bleach solution. I also sprayed down any reusable utensils that I would need to use. I then applied a piece of butcher paper to protect the lab bench and prevent contamination. I would put on gloves, my lab coat, and mask before I examine any item of evidence. And then I took photographs of what the packaging looked like and then photograph of the piece of evidence itself.
And then from that specific item, did you perform any testing on that item?
No, I did not do any testing on the item.
And why not?
I was, due to the case history, there was no visible red-brown stains on the item, as well as the fact there was a very limited surface area for me to sample from. In addition, I was informed that the car had been towed through a blizzard. So given the fact that there was potentially very limited material on the taillight, if any type of testing that we do would remove additional material. So I made the conservative decision to take a swabbing of the item and send it forward for DNA.
And as far as that swabbing of the item for DNA purposes, can you explain sort of what the process is or how that's done?
Yes, we use a polyester swab, which is a flat spatula-shaped swab. I apply sterile water to the swab and rub the exposed areas of the taillight. And then that swab dries before it's packaged and sent to DNA.
Now, with the court's permission, could I publish for the jury what's now been marked as exhibits 187 through 189?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have first photograph 8970. Now, Ms. Hartnett, directing your attention to what's up on the screen now is exhibit 187. Again, do you recognize what's depicted in there?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
That is the taillight that I removed from the black Lexus SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 8971, next photograph. What's now up on the screen is exhibit 188. Again, do you recognize what's depicted there?
Yes, I do.
And what is depicted there, and what, if anything, is in addition to the taillight, what, if anything, are you?
That is the taillight from the black Lexus SUV from a different angle. I am holding up a ruler to show the scale of the item.
And lastly, photograph 8972 to 189. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain to the jury what we're looking at, perspective-wise, and what, if anything, you're doing in this book?
That is the back side of the taillight. And again, I'm holding up a ruler to show the scale of the item.
Okay. Ms. Gilman, you can take that time. Sorry, just one moment, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Hartnett, from your initial response to the Canton Police Department, you secured a number of different items from the Canton Police Station that day, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And those were labeled subsequently as items 3-1 through 3-13, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, turning your attention to item 3-6, that was the apparent hair, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in reference to your analysis with regard to the hair, that QLIM term that I asked you about before, QLIM, what, if any, significance did that terminology have to your examination of the hair?
Per protocol, all hairs that will go forward for DNA are considered QLIM, meaning that the entire sample will be used up during testing.
And with regard to item 3-6, the apparent hair, can you explain the examination process or what it is that you're doing with reference to that?
Yes. I take the apparent hair and I mount it on a glass slide using deionized water. I then put the slide under a microscope, and I'm looking for certain characteristics to determine if that piece of material is a hair or fiber or some other unknown material.
And as far as your examination is concerned in that microscopic analysis, what are some of the things, or what are some of the characteristics that you're trained to look for, that you observed in this specific instance to give you that determination that it was a human hair?
On the exterior of the hair, there'll be scales, and depending on the shape, it can help you determine whether or not the hair is an animal hair or a human hair. Human hair have imbricate scales, which look like overlapping shingles with a wave-like edge. That is what I observed on this hair. In addition, the internal characteristics of the item are looked at. Running through the center of a hair is a medulla, which is a channel. Animal medullas and human medullas look different in that human medullas will have an amorphous shape, which means they don't really have any shape at all, whereas an animal medulla will have distinctive or can have distinctive patterns within them. Also, the size of that medulla or channel that runs through the center of a hair in a human hair is approximately 1/3 the entire width of the hair, where in animals it may be much larger than that.
Now, as far as based on your examination of this particular item, this hair, what, if any, opinion or what, if any, determination did you come to in regard to that item that you examined microscopically here?
I determined the hair was consistent with a human hair with a root.
Now, as far as that item was concerned, was there any measurements that were done in reference to that?
Yes, there were.
And do you recall what the measurements were or what the length was?
I'd have to refer to my notes if that's
Or
possible.
may the witness refer to her notes just in reference to that?
Yes.
The hair was approximately 7/8 inches long.
Now, with regard to item 3-6, the hair, did you perform any testing on that?
No, I did not perform any testing.
And why not?
The only type of analysis done on hairs in the criminalistics unit is a visual microscopic examination.
So where did the hair go from there?
At that point, I cut the hair into two pieces, one end that contains the root and then the remaining end of the shaft. The root end went to our internal DNA unit.
Now, it may be pretty well understood, but when you say root end versus shaft end, can you explain to the jury what you mean by those sort of descriptions?
The root end is the end that would have been attached to the scalp, and the shaft end is just the remaining outer portion of the hair.
And how is it that you're able to determine sort of the difference between the root end and the shaft end?
Through the microscopic characteristics under the that I viewed.
Now, with reference to that item 3-6, the hair, were any decisions made in regard to what testing could or would be performed on those samples?
Yes, based on the criminalistics protocol, the root end of the hair would be tested internally in our DNA unit, and if potential testing needed to be done on the shaft end, that would be sent out to an external lab.
And do you know why that is?
We don't perform that type of DNA testing at our lab.
And that's something, you're familiar with the term mitochondrial DNA testing?
I am familiar with it, but I don't really have a full understanding of it.
But as far as your understanding is the type of testing that would have had to been sort of sent out to an external vendor, that would be, the type was mitochondrial?
Yes, that was my knowledge at the time, yes.
Now, at some point, did you have a conversation with regard to examination of the remaining items in this case sometime in May of 23?
Yes.
And what was discussed?
It was discussed that I would examine the clothing and some of the other items for biological testing.
And specifically, there was an item 7-18, which was a gray sweatshirt attributed to Mr. John O'Keefe, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, from that, as far as sort of an additional analysis or an examination of those clothing items, what is it that you were doing and what is it that you were looking for in regard to your examination of the clothing?
I examined the item for biologicals. In this case, I was looking to determine if there was any blood present on the item. I also did damage analysis of various areas on the sleeve and the front and back of the item. I also took a trace collection from the item and additional DNA samples for that, additional skin cell collection samples from the item.
Now, starting first with, as far as that specific item, 7-18, the gray sweatshirt, what, if any, observations in general did you make when you examined it?
There were red, brown, and brown stains on the item. There was damage from the top of the shirt to the bottom of the shirt, as well as across each sleeve of the shirt. I also noted additional damage on the right sleeve.
Now, each of the areas of damage that you observed, similar to what we saw with the vehicle, were those areas marked as well?
Yes, I marked each of those areas that I was going to do further analysis on with a number.
And there were essentially 13 different areas on that sweatshirt that you had marked, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.